Welcome again. There are reports of a potential chemical attack in Mariupol, Ukraine's city, besieged by Russian forces. Now, according to the city's deputy mayor, Serhiy Orlov, the city council has confirmed a chemical poisoning delivered by a Russian drone.
The allegation that chemical munitions had been used against Mariupol originally came from the Azov battalion, a Ukrainian military unit with links to the far right. It is not clear how many soldiers were affected, but the battalion said its fighters had suffered minor injuries, including shortness of breath, with one man reportedly collapsing with cotton legs.
While reports of the use of chemical weapons are yet to be confirmed in the city of Mariupol, the battle for the besieged city is reaching a decisive phase ahead of an anticipated Russian offensive. Ukrainian mines hold up in the Azovstal industrial district, the only area they will control in Mariupol. Ukrainian mines are holed up in the Azovstal industrial district, the only area they still control in Mariupol. Should the Russians seize Azovstal, they will be in full control of Mariupol, the linchpin between the Russian-held areas to the west and east. The city has already been laid waste by weeks of Russian bombardments that have killed possibly thousands of civilians. Russia's defense ministry says forces have frustrated an attempt by the Ukrainian military to break out of the siege in Mariupol. Spokesperson Igor Kononenko says a group of up to 100 Ukrainian servicemen using tanks and armored vehicles attempted to fight their way out of the besieged industrial district. He says the attempt was stopped by air and artillery strikes. Fierce fighting between the Russian-backed forces and Ukrainian army has brought widespread devastation to Mariupol, once a city of more than 400,000 people on the Sea of Azov. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says tens of thousands of people have likely been killed in Russia's assault on the city. The number of people killed in the city has not yet been established, but if confirmed, it will be by far the largest number of casualties so far reported in one place in Ukraine, where cities, towns and villages have come under relentless bombardment and bodies, including civilians, have been littered in the streets. In the meantime, the Russian President Vladimir Putin flew into his country's Far East Amur region for talks with his Belarusian counterpart, Alexander Lukashenko, expected to focus on Ukraine and Russian-Belarusian integration. The two leaders headed to the Voskolia Cosmodrome to mark Russians' Annular Cosmonautics Day, commemorating the first manned spaceflight made in 1961.
Earlier today, British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss said the British government was working urgently to verify details of the alleged chemical weapons attack on residents of the city of Mariupol.
And later, British Armed Forces Minister James Happy said all options will be on the table if it is proven to be true. During an interview today, Happy said British Defence Intelligence so far had been unable to verify the reports, but that they were working urgently to understand whether or not chemical weapons have been used.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had said yesterday that Russia could resort to chemical weapons and called on the West to impose strong sanctions on Moscow that would deter even talk of the use of chemical weapons.
So I'm afraid that we know nothing more than you've been able to report, which is that there were some reports circulating on Ukrainian social media yesterday evening that chemical weapons had been used in Mariupol. Overnight, that's not something that defence intelligence here in London have been able to confirm, nor any of their intelligence counterparts with our allies around the world. And indeed, President Zelensky's address last night also referred to reports, so there's been no verification within the Ukrainian system either. However, to be clear, we are working urgently to understand whether or not chemical weapons have been used. And if they have, as the Foreign Secretary has said, the people responsible will be held to account. The use of chemical weapons is abhorrent. It does cross a line, and all options are on the table for how we would respond. Well, invariably, we rely heavily on the Ukrainians to be able to give us some sense of what has happened, because Mariupol is a heavily besieged city, and it's not somewhere that anybody can go. There are other intelligence assets that may be able to assist in that, but those are capabilities that you wouldn't want to talk about on air. But verifying it is clearly very important, because if chemical weapons have been used, that is a very important moment for our Prime Minister and other heads of government around the world to consider how we would respond. But as I've said, all options are on the table, and President Putin should be clear that the use of chemical weapons is simply not acceptable, and he shouldn't expect the West to stand by if they were used.
Last week, the World Health Organization said it was preparing for chemical assaults in Ukraine. The Global Health Agency's Europe Regional Director, Hans Kluge, said at a briefing in Lviv, given the uncertainties of the current situation, there are no assurances that the war will not get worse.
He said the WHO is considering all scenarios, making contingencies for different situations that could affect the people of Ukraine, from the continued treatment of mass casualties to chemical assault. We have joining us spokesperson for the World Health Organization, Tariq Jazarevich. He joins us from Geneva. Tariq, thanks for joining us on the program today.
Thank you.
Tariq, do these reports of chemical attack in Mariupol confirm the WHO's fears about how worse things could get in Ukraine?
Well, first of all, we have seen the reports, but we cannot confirm. We don't have a presence in Mariupol. We have not received any requests for assistance from the Ukrainian authorities. Now, if there would be such a request, WHO would obviously stand ready to provide any assistance when it comes to the public health. Now, let's be clear: the verification of such deliberate chemical events is something for other organizations within the UN system that have that mandate, and not for WHO. But again, we are working with every member state of WHO, including Ukraine, on chemical hazard preparedness, and we have been doing this for a long time. So we just hope that that there will be no need to respond to such an event. But should there be a need to respond, WHO would be there to assist.
So perhaps tell us a bit more about the situation in Mariupol. You mentioned no presence, so there's apparently difficulty in trying to figure out exactly what's happening on ground. Why has it been this difficult? And tell us a bit more about the humanitarian situation in Mariupol.
Well, it's very simple. We have not been able to get to Mariupol yet. So we have all seen these horrible and shocking images from the hospital there, where patients are lying in the corridors, where there's no electricity except in a surgical theater. But there's only so much we can do as humanitarians. We cannot stop bombs. we need to have that space that will allow us to come in and provide assistance. Now, WHO has been able to bring 200 metric tons of medical supplies to Ukraine, and most of these supplies have went to hard-to-reach areas in the east of the country. But unfortunately, Mariupol was not one of them.
Yeah, and that's interesting because it's been quite difficult to get into Mariupol or even get out of the city itself. It's been besieged by Russian forces. I want to go back to the issue of chemical weapons now. Perhaps if they were being used by the Russian forces, how would they be detected? What would be the symptoms?
Well, there are medical procedures to establish what agents have been used, but let's not speculate right now here. It's something that could have been looked into it, and there are institutions that are looking into any verifications. WHO would, if asked by the United Nations, would lend its assistance. But at this stage, really, let's try to see about the reports and see what actually happened. What we are focusing on is really to try to make Ukrainian health system surviving. In many areas, there are attacks on healthcare facilities. There are a number of injured people. Healthcare workers are struggling to provide care to all those who need the care. So we really need to focus on that. And this is what we are doing, trying to get as close as possible. I was myself in Dnipro a few weeks ago, and we were trying really to establish those communication lines with the hardest hit area, so health workers can continue to work, but also they don't feel abandoned and they know that they are supported.
Right, so their safety is important, but the reason I'm asking that question is because the WHO Europe regional director did say, that of course all contingencies are being considered, but people could be affected, by this chemical assaults. Some are already reporting a shortness of breath, and then there's cotton legs and other symptoms. Just trying to understand, if people have been affected by chemical weapons, what would that look like?
Well, we are looking into all possibilities, and we are doing this in all conflict zones. Basically, we are working with the member states, with governments, with health authorities, trying to see what should be done if there was a deliberate release of chemical, biological, or even radioactive/nuclear agents. So we work on these topics with the governments. We provide assistance, we provide equipment that is needed. This is a part of the WHO job. Now, confirming these things, it's something completely different, because that we go into the sphere of the expertise that we don't have. So WHO really, what we try to do is to prepare countries for any possibility, whether it's a chemical, or it is a biological, or it is a radionuclear event, whether it is a naturally occurring or it is a deliberate one. But really, it is difficult at this stage to have any confirmation on what actually had happened, and we hope really that we will get access to Mariupol to provide basic medical kits, including surgical material, because this is what is needed the most.
So, Tariq, we heard, I think, the beginning of this invasion, the use of phosphorus, in some parts of Ukraine. Does this qualify as, chemical attack in any way?
Well, again, we have to see and get more information. We simply, at this stage, we don't have information that would that would confirm that. What we can do is what we try to do is to basically prepare the system that will bring necessary supplies. We train health workers, and we have done this in a number of conflict countries where there was a risk of use of deliberate release of agents.
We'd like to appreciate your time. Thank you so much, WHO spokesperson Tarik Jezarevich. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Well, in another development, NATO says it's keen to work with democratic partners around the world. The comment was made by head of the alliance's military committee during a visit to South Korea today. Dutch Admiral Rob Bauer said the alliance has not ruled out any possible new members and that it was up to countries such as Sweden and Finland to decide if they wanted to join.
My visit here comes at a time where global security is under immense pressure. My visit here comes at a time where global security is under immense pressure. Europe is seeing destruction and displacement on a scale not seen since the darkest days of the last century. Without a doubt, a new era for global security has begun. I would like to reiterate that NATO is a defensive alliance that aims to protect the freedom and democratic rights of the 1 billion citizens that live on its soil. We are keen to work with democratic partners around the world to make sure that the force of law prevails over the law of force.
To Pakistan now, where Shehbaz Sharif took the oath as the 23rd Prime Minister of Pakistan during a ceremony held at the President's house Monday night.
Chairman of Pakistan Senate Sadiq Saranjrani administered the oath of office to the newly elected Prime Minister. During the National Assembly session to conduct the election for the Asian country's new Prime Minister, Shehbaz, President of the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz, won 174 votes in the 342-member House.
Shehbaz Sharif has become Pakistan's new Prime Minister after he won a parliamentary vote on Monday to elect a replacement for ousted Premier Imran Khan. Parliament's election of 70-year-old Sharif as Prime Minister on Monday followed a week-long constitutional crisis that reached a climax on Sunday when Imran Khan lost a no-confidence vote in Parliament. His departure from power sparked street protests and a mass resignation of MPs from Khan's Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf party in protest at the impending change of government just minutes before the votes. Khan had previously called for protests on Sunday. Analysts say Pakistan's new government will face economic and other domestic challenges. More than 100 lawmakers loyal to Khan resigned on Monday, creating a headache for the new Western-friendly incumbent Sharif as he tries to drag his country out of political and economic crisis. According to a political analyst, Pakistan's new government will face a series of challenges, from the country's economy to establishing legitimacy. However, he said this may not be the most smooth-sailing initiation.
The first challenge of Pakistan, that is how to manage the economy. Pakistan economy is in really bad shape. We see huge trade deficit. We see that there's been an erosion of foreign exchange reserves. The rupee is tumbling down. The energy sector crisis is intensifying. So this government ideally should take some unpopular decisions to fix the economy. But because of the, I would say, the campaign of the former Prime Minister, and because of the fact that the next elections would be due anytime soon, so they will be reluctant to go for those measures which are needed, which are vital to fix the economy. The new government will be facing at least 3 major challenges on the domestic front. The number one challenge is of legitimacy. The new Prime Minister is already marred with controversy, different sort of allegations. And people are questioning why they're questioning the legitimacy, because the entire process has been tainted with the allegations of horse trading, of buying and selling of loyalties. So this is one challenge the new government will be facing, how to legitimize itself.
Meanwhile, thousands of supporters of former Prime Minister Imran Khan poured onto the streets of Pakistani cities late on Sunday, a day after the incumbent leader lost a no-confidence vote in parliament. The crowds held placards and waved flags of Khan's Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf party as they chanted slogans. Shahbaz Sharif is the brother of former Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, affiliated with the Pakistan Muslim League. With over 3 decades in politics, forging a reputation as a workaholic administrator, obsessed with infrastructure projects in the vast Punjab province, home to more than half of Pakistan's 190 million people.
And joining us now is the Director of News, AAJ, Kamal Siddiqui. He joins us from Karachi. Kamal, thanks for joining us on the program. Analysts have talked about, the challenges facing the new Prime Minister, the economic challenges and, politics going on in Pakistan. Is this true that he does have, these mountains to cross?
Definitely he does. Thank you for inviting me to your program. Yes, he does. The biggest challenge, of course, is the economy. Foreign exchange reserves are dipping dangerously low, and there's a sort of an economic crisis on the horizon. So that's his biggest challenge, and that is something that he has to tackle almost immediately. But other than that, there are other challenges as well in terms of governance, in terms of corruption, in terms of, in many ways, trying to restore Pakistan's image in the eyes of the world. So these are things that he is, in his inaugural speech, he has talked about. And these are things that a lot of people are hopeful about, that in many ways he will be able to deliver, given his past record as a chief minister of a province, in which he has delivered quite well. So that is where we stand today.
So a lot of expectations on him politically and economically, right?
Yes, there are lots of expectations. Pakistan is at a sort of a situation where the economy is suffering because of a lack of, not just because of, in terms of the overall situation, world situation, but also because there's been a sort of a stalemate over the past 2 months. There's been a political vacuum in Pakistan. And the focus of the government, the Imran Khan government, was more to appease the electorate and less to do with looking at an IMF program. In fact, what they did with an IMF program was they rolled back on some of the commitments that they had made, which made it very difficult for the IMF to continue with that program. And that is something that Shahbaz Sharif has to look into, has to face. That's one. The other, of course, is that there are lots of other issues, challenges that his government will face. These are unfinished agendas of the Imran Khan government, whether it is militancy, whether it is provincial cohesion, and whether it is trying to get everybody on the same sort of wavelength when it comes to the economy. These are issues that he has to work on, and I think he started already. Today in his speech, today in his, what he has done is that he has outlined somewhat what he wants to do, and in many ways he's shown that he means business by his most important, or sort of what he's trying to bank on, is the fact that he's taken on board all the political parties that were the opposition, and he's trying to put together sort of a coalition government that will work and deliver. And it's a very big challenge for him, but in many ways, a lot of Pakistanis are hopeful that he will go ahead with this, and he will try to give those kind of reliefs that were not possible in the previous government. One area I would like to point out is press freedom. I think his meeting with journalists today, he assured them that he is going to ease out on the restrictions that the media faced during the Imran Khan government, the harassment, the picking up of journalists. That is something that he says he is going to bring to an end. So we are hopeful as journalists that once again we'll be in a position to speak what we want to without looking behind looking over our shoulders.
Kamal, let's talk about the former Prime Minister. How unpopular was Imran Khan before he was ousted?
I think Imran Khan was a very popular prime minister, but I think in many ways he was not his own self. They used to call him the selected prime minister because he was brought into power through some certain power arrangements in which our military had a very big hand. So in that sense, but what I've seen over the past couple of days is that the narrative that he has built up, in which he has talked about how he was ousted at the behest of a foreign conspiracy, that has caught on with a lot of Pakistanis, especially younger Pakistanis. You see, the voting age in Pakistan is 18, and there are lots of younger people. We have a very big younger population, and they have in some ways taken on in terms of the inspiration they have taken from what he has said, and that is something that has led to a lot of in fact he's going to hold a rally tomorrow and then one Saturday in Karachi, and what we are seeing is that the numbers at his rallies are increasing. So in that sense, yes, he is popular, but at the end of the day it is the elections, the general elections, whenever they are called, that will decide who is more popular and who should be Pakistan's next prime minister.
Do you think he has some chances in terms of his political future? Better chances?
I think Imran Khan's, in many ways, he has got the inspiration of the younger people. And that is something that's important to understand, because given the Pakistan's, in terms of our population, under 35 form a very big percentage of our population. So if he is able to connect with that electorate, yes, he has a chance. And I think he does have a chance. This time round, unless, unfortunately or fortunately, as compared to his previous election, he will not have the support of the establishment, which we call in Pakistan, which comprises of a number of stakeholders. But I think Imran Khan is ready to contest elections on the basis of his rising popularity. But having said that, this is something that we will see over the next couple of months in terms of the attendance at his political rallies. I think in many ways he appeals to the younger but the more educated people of Pakistan, which are a minority. Pakistan's literacy rate being under 30%. So most of the Pakistan's electorate votes for parties like the PMNL, which is headed by Shehbaz Sharif, and the People's Party, which is headed by Bilawal Bhutto. I see it's going to be a very close contest in the coming elections.
We can't wait to watch that. And of course, he's accusing the U.S. of, well, his ouster of being politically motivated, with the U.S. having a hand there. Kamal, we can't thank you enough for joining us on the program. We know that there will be developments on this. Imran Khan still has a chance, is what we're understanding. He might be participating in general elections and possibly a chance of coming back as Prime Minister, right?
There is a chance, of course. I mean, in Pakistan, in terms of the political situation, there's a lot of unpredictability. And there is a chance that he will, if we have free and fair elections, that's of course, the bottom line. If we have free and fair elections, both have a very good chance of. It's how they conduct themselves in terms, and it is what they capture in terms of the imagination of the voter. In terms of the voter, the biggest issue right now is the inflation. When we look at the rising prices, and also in terms of law and order. These are two issues that are the prime in terms of what the electorate or the voter wants to address by the leaders. So let us see. And Shehbaz Sharif has started, he has already started holding meetings. He has started working towards this. He has said that we're going to have a 6-day week. We're not going to he has cancelled the 2-day holidays. He has changed how the government's going to work. So he understands the fact that people are expecting a lot from his time as Prime Minister. I think he's going to give a good fight. And I think in terms of how the electorate votes, he has an edge. But Imran Khan can, of course, surprise. He has done that in the past as well. He has taken this narrative of there's a foreign conspiracy, and it has caught on to the imagination of a lot of people. So let us see how it goes. It's going to be a closely fought election whenever it is announced.
Kamal Siddiqui, thank you again for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
We move straight to the developing story in the United States of multiple people being shot in at a subway station in New York. Local media says shots were fired at the 36th Street station in Sunset Park around 8:30 a.m. local time today.
Well, officials have warned residents to avoid the area and expect delays. At least 4 train lines are also said to have been delayed in both directions. First responders have confirmed at least 13 people are injured. The incident took place during rush hour. Police suspect the gunman is on the loose.
Let's go now to our correspondent, Maria Bird, who is keeping tabs on the situation from Washington. Hi, Maria. What's the update on the gunman?
Well, at this time, they do have suspected he's somewhere between 5'5" and 5'7", about 170 pounds. He was wearing construction-type clothing. They're not even sure he might have had an MTA jacket on. They are asking the public if they do have any pictures and video of him, that they do send it in because they are still now looking for him. This train was the N train headed toward Manhattan, so they are trying to see exactly where he might have ended up. He did come on the train with a gas bomb that he obviously let off and then shooting the 16 individuals. At this time, there seems to be no life-threatening injuries and that everyone will be able to survive from this, but it was 16 individuals. And so he is on the loose. They're not seeing this as an act of terrorism. They do believe that he was what they're considering a lone wolf, and that this was a one incident, and they're not expecting to see any other active activity throughout the day.
And Maria, earlier a report said 12 people were shot. What do we now know about the casualties?
There are 16 individuals that were shot, but at this time there's no life-threatening injuries.
And we know the area has been cordoned off, but how are police treating this? Is this a case of domestic terrorism or just an isolated incident?
They're believing this is an isolated incident. They're not at this time saying that this is anything to do with terrorism at all. They're seeing this as an isolated incident, potentially one that they are expecting to be able to get some resolution to, and obviously this is an active manhunt at this time.
Maria, do situate the area where the shooting happened, the landmarks around the area, and what could help us possibly understand why this happened where it did?
They're still trying to figure out exactly why this occurred. They do know that this area, there's schools in the area. This was underground in the subways. And so that is an area, obviously, that's very hard to escape from. And so by filling the actual train up with the gas would then make it very difficult for people to see, have people just escaping out. They did block off some of that section of the train, so trains are not able to enter while this is an active investigation. They're also blocking off some of the streets around the location as well, just to get a better sense as to what exactly occurred. This was at the 36th Street area, which is heading into Manhattan. This was coming from Brooklyn. They believe it was the N train. So this was a train that frequently goes in and out of the city, a very active train for individuals that were coming into the city for work in the morning, as you stated before, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which means that is a heavy influx of individuals on the train during those times.
We also understand, I mean, it's a thriving Chinatown there, views of the Statue of Liberty, and, you know, the warning is for people to stay as much as possible away from that area. But I'd like to thank you, Maria Bird, for that update.
And over in the UK, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Finance Minister Rishi Sunak are to receive fines for breaching strict coronavirus lockdown rules. Police have been investigating 12 gatherings at Downing Street and the Cabinet Office after an internal inquiry found Mr. Johnson's staff had enjoyed alcohol-fueled parties with the British leader attending a few of those events himself.
A government spokesperson confirmed the notification from the Metropolitan Police. Mr. Johnson's wife has also been notified by police that she will be fined over the breaches as well. The spokesperson released a statement confirming she will receive a fixed penalty notice, but has received no further details about the nature of the FPN.
Police say they would issue more than 50 fixed penalty notices or fines of those who attended gatherings in Mr. Johnson's offices and residence in breach of lockdown rules.
And Indonesia's parliament has passed a long-awaited bill to tackle sexual violence aimed at providing a legal framework for victims to secure justice in a country where sexual abuse has often been regarded as a private matter. A majority of lawmakers backed the bill at the plenary session in parliament, overcoming opposition from some conservative groups in the world's biggest Muslim-majority country after 6 years of deliberation. The bill has been broadly welcomed by activists, though some have objected to its limited scope, with only some sex crimes included and the omission of a specific clause on rape, which the government has said will be included in other legislation. The final draft of the law includes prison terms of up to 12 years for crimes of physical sexual abuse, both in marriage and outside, 15 years for sexual exploitation, 9 years for forced marriage, which includes child marriage, 4 years for circulating non-consensual sexual content.
It's back to the campaign trail for the main rivals in the French presidential election, just 2 days after the first round of the election, which will see Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen face off in the second round on the 24th. Earlier today, the French president met hospital workers in the eastern French city of Mulhouse. Addressing the president, one nursing assistant told Mr. Macron that health workers and people are suffering, urging him to surround himself with competent people. Back in 2020, doctors in the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak in the eastern French cities of Mulhouse and Colmar warned the system was at breaking points. Macron is struggling to convince working-class voters to vote for him and not far-right candidate Marine Le Pen in the second round of the presidential election.
Ils vivent dans la misère. Et c'est pour ça qu'on se bat pour eux. Je suis enseignant. C'est de l'emploi. Je suis enseignant et je vais avec eux. Il y a des gens ici qui meurent de faim. Je sais.
Meanwhile, French far-right presidential candidate Marine Le Pen today said she had no secret agenda for France to leave the European Union, even if her attempts to reform the bloc fail. Le Pen has ditched past plans to hurl France out of the EU, its free movement, Schengen zone and the euro. However, she remains deeply Eurosceptic. She says she would renegotiate the agreement on Schengen and increase the number of customs agents, reintroducing checks on goods entering the country from other EU states. She says such a move would be to fight against fraud, but analysts say it raises questions over friction-free trade within the EU's single market. Ultimately, Le Pen envisages the EU as an alliance of member states. Asked if she would leave the EU if all her attempts to reform the bloc fail, Le Pen replied, not at all.
It's happening in less than 2 weeks, the second round of the French presidential election. President Macron sets to make history as the first candidate in 20 years, first French president in 20 years to be elected a second time. He's back on the campaign trail. There he is, speaking to health workers, hospital workers, beg your pardon, earlier today. His rival, Marine Le Pen, also making her own rounds. Both will be facing off on the 24th of April as they prepare for the presidency. We have joining us now political analyst Mamadou Bassam. He is in Paris, where he's given us a bird's eye view of the elections. Mamadou, thanks for joining us on the program. How are Parisians reacting to the fact that they have to decide who gets the Champs-Élysées from between the same candidates that they saw in 2017?
Thank you very much to invite me in your TV. The Parisian and the French are not surprised because 3 years ago, the polls given the two finalists of the election. However, some people who are the left and the right, they are disappointed because of the result. They work, but the context gives that they didn't have public meetings to express their program and to talk about the elections. We have a context about Ukraine, and they That's why they didn't have really meetings to talk about elections.
Right, and the two candidates have very different ideologies. Just help us understand, what they really are. I summarize it because the French elections are, quite unique, especially to the French.
The two candidates, they have different ideologies because sometimes they have the same ideologies about the capitalist. All things about capitalists, Macron and Le Pen are the same. They are for big society. They have the same politics. The difference is between Macron is something who don't talk about the African people, the Arabian people. He didn't say that everything who didn't work in France for Marine Le Pen, it's for the étranger. It's for if the society don't work in France, it's because of African, because of Arabia, because of other people, but not because of the French. This is a difference. Marine Le Pen is something who are not accepted. The difference that in France we can have black people, we can have Arabic people, we can have all people, and it's the culture of the France. What is the difference of Marine Le Pen and Emmanuel Macron?
And Mamadou, I mean, President Macron, according to some analysts, has been rather unpopular in the last year or so. Could that change before the 24th?
We hope, but I don't think, because Emmanuel Macron, he have his program and he will execute his program last he write. That's why I don't think that it will change. He will become more and more unpopular. He have some politics and he didn't have social politics. Emmanuel Macron is not for social politics and he's not for democratic politics. You know that 3 years you have some movement of Gilets jaunes and they ask more social and they ask more democracy because they want to decide. People want to decide what the government have to do. They want more and more democracy.
To you, what sort of leadership would you say France needs?
I think that at this time, it's somebody who can make everybody together. We need to be together and we don't need to just for rich people, because Emmanuel Macron, his politics is for rich people, not for poor people. We need somebody who will do politics for rich, for poor people, and who make all the people together and work together. That's why the France they need, and the France will grow up, and we have the France we know in the past.
It's a tough call for both candidates.
I'm tempted to ask him who's his preferred candidate.
Oh, no. He can't reveal that. Mamadou, thank you for speaking with us. And we'll keep tabs, on the French elections, reaching out to you from time to time before the 24th.
Thank you very much.
Philippine authorities say at least 25 people died in landslides today and floods caused by Tropical Storm Maggie as it hit the eastern and southern coasts of the Southeast Asian country. A storm made landfall on Sunday with sustained winds of up to 65 kilometers per hour and gusts of up to 80 kilometers per hour. Maggie is the first storm to hit the archipelago this year, which sees around 20 such storms annually. Images shared by the Philippine Coast Guard showed rescuers wading through flooded roads and rescuing survivors from landslide-hit areas. In the eastern province of Leyte, over 14 bodies were recovered after being buried under a landslide, according to the National Disaster Agency. Tropical Storm Maggie is expected to weaken to 45 kilometers per hour and move back out over the sea today, according to the Weather Bureau.
And over in South Africa, authorities say at least 45 people have been killed in floods caused by days of heavy rainfall in the coastal province of KwaZulu-Natal. Many people are still missing. Emergency services are searching for survivors. According to reports, some in the city of Durban were standing on rooftops awaiting rescue. Key roads across the city are shut and mudslides have destroyed many homes.
we try to run away, my young children, my young boy. There's cabbage, the soil, it's gone over on top. Now we try to take the children down on the soil. Lucky we found it. I got nowhere to go now. I got no house, I got no nothing. Yes, my family is there by my neighbors. We tried to give me the place to sleep last night. We never sleep last night. The situation is very, very bad. I don't know where we're going to sleep now.
We're counting days now to the Easter celebrations, but perhaps no one is more excited than the Salvadorans, who were again able to celebrate the Easter season yesterday with a traditional ceremony in which men dressed as, not as Jesus, but as devils, whipping people after COVID-19 cast a thick pall over it last year. The event is meant to highlight the universal struggle of good versus evil and takes place each year in the town of Tesistepec, El Salvador, located some 83 kilometers north of San Salvador.
We have a local resident who dressed as a devil, Christian Sanchez, who said, "We have tried not to lose this tradition. Today we have the opportunity to return to the streets of Tesistepec with a reason for joy, and we are entirely motivated after 2 years of absence." Actors called Telku Greens, which means demon man, dressed as devils to punish people for their sins by lashing them. Many flocks from different surrounding regions in El Salvador take part in the event and get whipped to repent for sins committed during the year.
And there, of course, the man dressed as Jesus attending Mass and offering their performances as a sacrifice. And when Mass ends, the whipping begins on the streets. The annual ceremony takes place before Easter, when Catholics and other Christians celebrate Jesus rising from the dead after dying for their sins. That's a true story, isn't it? Jesus died for the sins. I mean, those demons can't take away sins.
Interesting tradition.
Interesting indeed, and thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.
I'm Millicent Walker. Have a good evening.